Crime in the City.
Hi friends, welcome back to Crime in the City, the podcast dedicated to the true crimes and cold cases of New York. I'm your New York City host Cece, and before we dive into today's case, I just wanted to say a quick sorry for not being around with new episodes these last few months. Despite all my insanely cautious efforts this past year, I ended up getting COVID in late winter, early spring, and it really knocked me out on my ass for quite a while. It was not a fun time, but I am thankful to be healthy again and here with you. So thank you for your patience and for tuning in. Today's case is actually the first case I ever researched, and it's a cold one. We'll be going on a journey together to try and figure out who killed Sarah Fox in 2004. Hold on to your asses, friends, because this unsolved murder is full of wild details, certifiable nutjobs, and a whole lot of my wild speculations and opinions. The year was 2004. Everyone was wearing those ugly yellow Livestrong bracelets. Parkour became a thing. A very, very annoying thing. Facebook was still just for college students. The top song that year in America in every school dance was Yeah by Usher, Lil Jon, and Ludacris. Speaking of music, 2004 was a banger year with brilliant jams like The Way You Move, Slow Jams, Pieces of Me, Boulevard of Broken Dreams, Confessions Part 2, Mr. Brightside, Lean Back, Goodies, My Boo, and Drop It Like It's Hot, which is my dad's favorite song. It was also a phenomenal year for cinema. Masterpieces were released in 2004, including Shrek 2, The Notebook, Napoleon Dynamite, Dodgeball, Anchorman, Mean Girls, 13 Going on 30, National Treasure, and White Chicks. All Oscar-worthy films. I'm sure I've just given away my age group and personality, but honestly, I still listen to all those songs and watch all those movies because they're epic. You're Fired and That's Hot were both coined that year. ODB of the Wu-Tang Clan, arguably the best musical group, died in 2004. In notable celebrity nonsense, Janet Jackson's breast was exposed by Justin Timberlake during the Super Bowl halftime show, and Ashley Simpson was caught lip-syncing on SNL. Apparently, the website whitehouse.com was a porn site until 2004. I'm sure Bill loved that. And lastly, I have some creepy, murderish facts about 2004. In Kenya, an elephant charged at and killed Lokalo Ekitela and her son, and then buried their bodies in the ground before fleeing the scene. In Paris, police were investigating an uncharted area of the catacombs and found a secret room with a stocked bar and restaurant. They came back shortly after to trace where the power and phone lines had been installed from, and discovered the lines had been cut and a note had been left for them reading, "Do not try and find us." Those people sound like a great time. Now that we're all caught up, let's hop in our time machine and head back. We are inputting May 19th, 2004, Inwood Hills, Manhattan, New York. And we're off. It was a beautiful Thursday afternoon in New York City, and 21-year-old Sarah Fox headed out of her apartment around 5 p.m. to go for a jog at her neighborhood park, Inwood Hill Park, in northern Manhattan. Her roommate reported her missing the next day, not having seen Sarah or heard from her since she left for her jog the day before. Missing person flyers were posted, there was media coverage on her disappearance, and 5 days after she was last seen, on May 24, 2004, a rented school bus came to New York from Sarah's New Jersey hometown, full of family, friends, acquaintances, and strangers to lead a search party in Inwood Hill Park. Accompanied by police officers, the search party spread out and started canvassing the park, looking for any sign of Sarah. Sarah's naked body was found about 50 yards west of the Hudson Parkway in an isolated area of the park near a ravine where the land had been left uncut and was dense with vegetation. Her body had been staged in a ritualistic-like fashion. She was placed on a bed of damp leaves with yellow tulip petals and branches from a nearby poplar tree surrounding her body. According to a botanist, the tulips had been picked about 24 to 48 hours before her body was found and came from somewhere else in the park. Meaning, the killer picked the tulips and returned to the scene of the crime to place them there after he had killed her. This is something a lot of killers do. They revisit their victims or burial sites so they can relive their crime. Sarah's larynx had been crushed, as well as several bones in her neck, indicating strangulation as the cause of her death. She had also suffered a harsh blow to the chest, breaking a rib, most likely to stifle any screams. Her body was so badly decomposed from recent rain that police struggled to identify her at first, but were able to make the ID because of the size of the body, her tribal stamp tattoo on her lower back, and her hair color. Dental records later confirmed it as well. Due to the decomposition, the medical examiner was unable to determine if she had been sexually assaulted, but it is assumed she was because the killer had also placed a stick between her legs. The crime scene did not show any signs of a struggle, leading police to believe she had been killed on a nearby jogging trail and dragged to her final location. Detectives working the case believe that whoever killed Sarah Fox must have had intimate knowledge of the park landscape since she had been placed in such a remote area of the park. It had to be someone who frequented the park and knew all the secluded areas. Their suspect profile included joggers, dog walkers, cyclists, or someone who lives near the park. Over a week later, another massive search was conducted in the park to find any other clues or evidence in her murder. Not really sure why they waited 10 whole days to do this, but they did. All they found was her CD player, which they fumed for DNA and prints. At the time, no match came up, but we'll get back to that in a bit. Sarah Fox was a student at the prestigious Juliard, where she was studying acting. She was beloved by her classmates, friends, and family. She was 5'2", 110 pounds, had strawberry blonde pixie-cut hair, and was full of talent and boundless energy. Her death devastated her entire community, both within Juliard and back home in New Jersey. Now, who killed Sarah Fox? Why was her murder never solved? The lack of evidence frustrated everyone. Because it took so long to find her body and the rain had washed away so much of the evidence, police really did not have a lot to go on. That does not mean we are without suspects, because we definitely have plenty of contestants to bring on down, as well as my own wild speculations. Let's get into this. The number one suspect to this day, nearly 20 years later, is still Dimitry Sheinman. I need to warn you that every fact I tell you about this man will be crazier than the last. Dimitri Shineman is a clairvoyant. Now, I don't know your personal beliefs, but I will let you get to know me a little bit better for a second. I believe in a lot of mystical things. The paranormal, the magical, the spirits, the ghosts, the energies, aliens. I believe in quite a lot of things. So it may surprise you when I say that I call major bullshit on nearly everyone who claims to be a clairvoyant. I do believe some people have the gift, but I think most people claiming to be psychic or clairvoyant are just grifters. Dimitri Sheinman? I believe he's a clairvoyant as much as I believe the earth is flat. To clarify, that means I do not believe he is a clairvoyant and the earth is definitely not flat. Sorry to any listeners who may be flat earthers, but you're wrong. Anyway, moving right along. I think Dimitri is full of absolute bullshit and using clairvoyance as a get away with murder card. Let's bring the son of a bitch down and get to know him a bit better, shall we? I really like to highlight all the red flags that suspects bring up, but this guy's red flags make red flags look like great ideas, so I'm really struggling to find the proper word for his nonsense. Red flag number 1. His neighbors brought his name to the police after Sarah's body was discovered. They told police that he lives close to the park and walks his large dog there every day and was known to get into arguments with random people in the park because he would keep his dog unleashed. Listen, if your neighbors think you might be a murderer, you probably are a murderer. There are so many countless cases of serial killers and murderers whose neighbors allegedly had no idea, never saw it coming, blah blah blah. So if your neighbors think it could have been you, that's a neon sign of a red flag. They clearly think you're violent and or unstable. Now, let's get into his clairvoyant bullshit that is just riddled with red flags. Police bring this guy in for questioning and he's immediately like, I'm a clairvoyant. I saw the whole murder happen in a vision. He began telling police details about Sarah's murder that were never released to the public. As we know, police do this often to help with their investigation and rule out false confessions, bad leads, keep the crazies away, and find the real criminals. He told police that Sarah's rib had been broken, she had been menstruating at the time of her murder, she had a stick placed between her legs, and that her clothes had been neatly folded and her tampon had been placed on top of them. He described what happened to her and claimed it all came to him in this big violent vision. He also threw in some details that were wrong, which is a tactic that smart criminals do to throw the scent off them. Police brought him in for questioning several times, but they could never find anything to pin him to the crime. I'm sure he had some sort of nonsense alibi, but there was no evidence and they could not arrest him and charge him with the murder of Sarah Fox without any evidence in a proper case. Dimitri did end up spending about 2 months in Rikers prison though. He was arrested for punching a guy in the face at the same park Sarah was murdered. To be fair, the guy he punched had it coming. Apparently, the man Dimitri punched knew that he was a suspect in a murder investigation and was being really aggressive towards him, and let his large dog jump on Dimitri's pregnant wife. I probably would have knocked him out too. Once Dimitri was out of prison, he moved to South Africa with his wife for several years, but came back to New York in 2012 because he claimed he had to deliver important news about the case. He claimed to have a major psychic revelation about who Sarah's murderer was. He had consulted with other clairvoyants in South Africa and had some sort of collective psychic vision, and they all saw the same name in their heads. Right. Instead of just contacting police with his revelation, he did what any sane person accused of murder would do. He held an elaborate press conference right outside the precinct before heading in to hand over the name written on a piece of paper and sealed in an envelope. Various news and media outlets gathered in front of the precinct at a staging area to interview Dimitri and ask him questions about his psychic vision and Sarah Fox. The cops referred to it as a circus, and it was straight up bonkers. The man told reporters that Sarah still talks to him from beyond the grave and that he is in constant contact with her, that she wants him to clear his name and catch her real killer. She told him, quote, "Go get him, let's get the killer, let's do this," end quote. He then walked into the precinct for a few minutes to hand off the vital information and exited with his wife. According to police, the paper contained the name of a Juliard music professor who they had already questioned in 2004 and ruled out. Apparently, this teacher was on their radar because he completely and dramatically broke down at Sarah's funeral, which raised red flags. As we discussed in the Gideon murder case, detectives tend to go to the funerals of murder victims when the case is still open to suss out any potential suspects, profile any suspicious behaviors, including people who show no emotion or too much emotion. They questioned the teacher in 2004 and quickly ruled him out as a suspect. He was just moved by the death of his student. In 2014, Dimitri held another press conference and spewed a lot of crazy, saying that Sarah still communicates with him, and said the following: "Sometimes I walk by and she winks at me, and she knows. She says, 'I know exactly what you're doing, and I love you.' Right now, she just looked at me and made a bunch of faces. She knows what's going on. I can't speak for her, but she knows exactly what's going on." He also rambled on about how much he intimidates Sarah's real killer, saying, quote, "He's very scared. He's scared of me. I've never communicated with him directly, but he's a disgusting, revolting man. She wants the guy's blood," end quote. He also invited a reporter to his home in South Africa and showed him how he communicates with Sarah's spirit. He had built a shrine. On his desk, he had tons of candles, animal figurines, and a photograph of Sarah underneath a glass panel. I told you, everything I would say about this man would be crazier than the next. And we haven't even finished. Dimitri changed his name to Victor and self-published a book about Sarah's murder, him being a suspect, and his psychic visions, all written in the third person. I was able to find an excerpt on news.com.au, but it is bonkers and sounds like a straight-up confession. He explained how the murder happened and the exact location. Here's a taste. Quote, "Victor had the strangest sensation of latching onto a pertinent segment of reality which was out there, in the depth of the park. Something was clicking. He was transfixed, staring somewhere in the direction of the bridge, fingering his chin. Victor was looking in slow motion at a fist slamming into a woman's ribcage, and then experienced a sharp pain from the punch. Victor was transported to the murder site, suspended from above, observing the nightmare unfolding below. Thankfully, a mechanism to spare Victor from seeing the entire dreadful process of changes inflicted on Tara's flesh blurred the worst. He did not want to know what the sick fuck was doing. There was no need for it. Gaping at the creature who by now switched to pure survival mode, Victor sensed himself standing at the entrance to the darkest room imaginable, beyond which threshold lies every mental disease belonging to this world leading to sadism. The murderer became a crouching gorilla-like shape, abruptly moving his head this way or that, making a quick getaway while trying to melt into the thicket." End quote. I told you, just bonkers. Also riddled with so many grammar errors, it was really hard to read that. The book is also called Is He Friendly? As if you needed any more crazy to fan the flames of guilt. You're probably thinking, damn, could this guy be any more guilty or get any crazier? Well, friends, I saved the best for last. Dimitri Sheinman started his own religion in South Africa. Yep, you heard that correctly, his own religion. He calls it The Power and has a truly insane website called the Sheinman Source. He is referred to as the One, the True Messiah, or just Victor. It's all very confusing, as are most religions created by crackpots. He offers healings, clairvoyant services, which also include the ability to tell if a piece of technology is broken because, quote, even man-made machines have simple souls, end quote. He also claims to have the ability to inhabit the bodies of people who are sick to, quote, become the most compassionate of beings, end quote. He also offers something called techniques from the humanoid matrix and hooks in the texture of reality. Scrolling through his website made my head hurt and my skin crawl. Now, that's enough about Dimitri, Victor, the True Messiah, Sarah's killer, or whatever you want to call him. Let's dive back into the case. Sarah's body was placed in a ritualistic killing sort of way, so let's analyze the details for a second and try to figure out what they could mean. Her body was laid on a bed of leaves, and yellow tulips were placed all around her. The flowers could be a sign of remorse. They were picked and placed around her body days after the murder occurred. As we discussed earlier, killers often revisit burial sites or kill sites to relive their murder or place flowers as a sign of remorse. Yellow tulips symbolize a few things. Originally, yellow flowers symbolized hopeless love and jealousy. In modern times, they are associated with cheerfulness, which is really twisted. Tulips specifically are a sign of perfect love. The color and flower choice could have just been out of pure opportunity since they were growing in the park and weren't bought at a nearby floral shop. That could also just be a forensic countermeasure so no florist would be able to identify a man buying yellow tulips days before her body was discovered. In modern times, placing flowers at a grave or during a funeral is a sign of grief, sympathy, respect, and mourning. But in earlier years, flowers placed at a funeral or near a dead body were a tactic used to cover up the smell of a decaying body. There were 24 tulip petals found at the scene. Now, there could have been more. Given the heavy rain between her death and discovery, some of them could have blown away. But let's go with 24. The number 24 symbolically means family, specifically a balanced and happy family, rebirth, and a connection to nature, the elements, and the universe. Sarah was found naked. Removing her clothes could have been a forensic countermeasure, as well as a way to further humiliate the deceased. If this murder was as ritualistic as it seems, it could be tied to that. The removal of the clothes could also strongly indicate that she had been sexually assaulted. Sarah's clothes were never found and were likely kept as a trophy. She had a stick placed between her legs, which could also indicate sexual assault or sexual sadism in some capacity, or the murderer was impotent, though most impotent sadists use stabbing in place of a sexual assault. Strangulation is often seen as a crime of passion. It's possible that Sarah knew her killer, or it was someone that knew her, like someone stalking her that she was unaware of, a jealous Juliard classmate, something like that. Sarah Fox was a talented, beautiful, incredibly kind human being with infectious energy and love. All her friends from school in her hometown only had positive things to say about her, and they all basically said the same thing. That she was kind to everyone she met, she was thoughtful, she cared about people, and was truly a great person. She was even a mentor to actress Gillian Jacobs while at Juliard. She was the actress who played Britta on Community, and she actually helped out during the search for Sarah before her body turned up. So who would want to hurt a woman who was so well-liked, who had such a bright future, and was always nice to everyone? I've got a few theories, obviously. It's time for Cece's Wild Speculations. Number 1 on my list is obviously Dimitry Sheinman. There's just too many neon flashing red flags with that guy. Between the psychic visions, knowing details that weren't released, the constant involvement in the case, the shrine, the creepy religion, the grisly detailed book written in the third person, it's just all a little too much. Killers usually insert themselves into the investigation in some way, whether it's joining search parties, giving false leads to police, giving interviews to the press. They try to be the star of the show. Dimitri checks way too many of those boxes. He's still talking about it, profiting from it, and involving himself nearly 20 years later. And the cult-like religion he started fits in line with the ritualistic killing. Number 2 on my list is Sarah's boyfriend. At the time of her death, she was dating a fellow Juilliard student, and it's unclear from my research if he was ever a suspect. I know that police did question him, but I'm not sure what his involvement was in the search for Sarah or after her body was found. Statistically speaking, there's a high probability that Sarah knew her killer. As all true crime obsessed people know, it's almost always the husband or boyfriend. Obviously, that's a pretty heavy generalization, but more often than not, that's where police turn to first. Number 3 on my list is a general statement, a hometown acquaintance. It might have been one of the people from the search party. If you remember, a bus full of New Jersey hometown acquaintances came out to lead the search with law enforcement, and one of those men found the body. In 2018, Lieutenant David Nilsson, who is the lead for the NYPD Cold Case Squad, told the Daily News that they had another suspect in mind who also moved overseas, who was not Dimitry Sheinman. He said, quote, "It may not be a total stranger attack. For all we know, it's someone she had a past relationship with many, many years before. Some people never forget," end quote. Typically, strangulation is a personal attack, a crime of passion, and done by someone the victim knew. They found her body in a very secluded, dense area of the park, so it stands to reason that the person who killed her led the search party to where he had left her body. I didn't find any details on who exactly found the body, but I did find that it was in fact a hometown acquaintance, which means it wasn't law enforcement or a family member. Maybe someone from high school, an ex-boyfriend, someone who was obsessed with her long ago and never got over it. Number 4 on my list is also a general statement, a jealous Juilliard student. Juilliard is a prestigious performing arts institute. They have a very low acceptance rate and only about 1,000 students in attendance at a time. It's incredibly hard to get into Juilliard, and the curriculum is demanding, rigorous, and unrelenting. With such a small student body, it's an incredibly close-knit environment. Sarah was loved by all her professors and her classmates and was talented and constantly praised. With the high level of competition, pressure, and closeness of everyone, it's possible this could have been done by someone who had anger, jealousy, or resentment towards Sarah. I went to art school. It wasn't Juilliard or performing arts, but I believe the general idea of any type of creative university is the same. It is an incredibly cutthroat place with an enormous amount of pressure. Creative people sometimes get a rap for being up in the clouds and having it easy, but I assure you it is absolutely nuts and not an easy life. One bad critique from a professor could feel like the end of the world. It doesn't seem like a stretch to me that one of these students just snapped. I'm a stable person and relatively strong, but I can't even count the amount of times my professors make me cry. The creative world is a crazy one. If you haven't listened to my Peter Bronstein case, go listen to that for more proof on my theory. My last suspect and wild speculation is one that comes from a time in New York City that may feel like a million years ago. The year was 2012 and Occupy Wall Street was happening. If you were living under a rock in 2012, waiting for the Mayans to be right and the world to end, then go on Google and read up on Occupy Wall Street. Remember when I said that police led a search 10 days after Sarah's body was found and they found her CD player and fumed it for prints and DNA and nothing came back? Well, in 2012, a match returned when DNA from a chain used during an Occupy Wall Street protest was entered into the system. This chain was used to hold open subway tours. Not sure why police needed to test it for DNA evidence. I guess not paying for a subway ride is a crime that requires DNA evidence to be solved. I don't know. So anyway, this chain had the same DNA found on Sarah Fox's CD player. For a brief moment, police thought they had finally caught a break in the case and could tie someone to her murder with real evidence. But alas, it was quickly dismissed as a technician error. But I am not dismissing it because I have some real issues with this, obviously. The same technician was on duty for Sarah's murder and the Occupy Wall Street chain thing. It could have truly been an error in evidence handling, but my red flags are up because 2004 to 2012 is a long time to go without learning from your mistakes and how to properly handle evidence, which is literally your one job and the first lesson they teach you. It seems way too convenient and suspicious to have mishandled 2 pieces of evidence from 2 separate crime scenes 8 years apart. Where were the gloves? Why was DNA found on both Sarah's CD player and a chain from an Occupy Wall Street protest? Why did police randomly decide to test that chain? Were they already suspicious of that technician, maybe? The technician's literal job is to handle crime scene evidence. How was this mishandled twice? Seems too convenient and coincidental to chalk it up to incompetence. Either this guy had something to do with Sarah's murder for some reason, or he truly needs to be fired and never be allowed near a crime scene ever again. Is he just licking evidence? I don't understand. Maybe he was part of the cover-up and was paid off by the killer? I don't know. Lots of possibilities. People like this shouldn't be in law enforcement because they just throw everything off and make it that much harder to find out who really did it. Those are my wild speculations. Definitely comment on the blog or the Instagram post and let me know who you think did it, if you have any of your own wild speculations, if you also believe in aliens, and what your thoughts on Dimitri are. Do you think he did it, or do you think he's just a crazy person looking for attention? Or maybe you think he's the real deal. I don't know. Let me know. Thank you, friends, for coming on this journey with me back to 2004 to learn about Sarah Fox's cold case. I hope they catch the person responsible someday so her family gets the closure they deserve. Don't forget to like, rate, subscribe, and follow on Instagram at Crime in the City. Bye!